What if saying no wasn't selfish, but actually strategic? What if protecting your energy was the most gracious and generous thing that you as a leader could do for your leadership? This episode today is for every leader who's ever felt guilty for needing space or exhausted from giving too much. This is Transformation Station, the leadership podcast that digs into serious, deep, and real and relevant topics. So let's go ahead and get started. Hello there. Welcome back to Transformation Station, the leadership podcast where we deep dives into the mindset, strategies, and inner evolution of high impact leadership. I'm your host, Adrienne Townsend Benson, and today we're diving into a topic that every purpose driven, service minded leader wrestles with. I know you want to know what that topic is, so let me tell you, it's boundaries. No, not the kinds of boundaries that shut people out, but the kind that keep you aligned, energized, and effective. But here's the truth. If you do not set boundaries, burnout will set the boundaries for you. And in this episode, we're unpacking how to lead with clear limits and full presence. Remember, every week we meet on Wednesdays. Why? Because this world doesn't need more perfect leaders. Nope. Instead, it needs real, grounded, resilient ones, just like you and me. And as we get started, listen, I want to say thank you so very much because you have been tuning in and sharing Transformation Station with others. Guess what? This week we hit 750 downloads in 4 months. So I want to say thank you so much. Keep watching, keep sharing, keep on listening. Now, today, I'm really excited about this particular episode because we're going to be focusing on holding your ground without burning bridges. And we have a very special guest that is joining us today. Her name is Twyla Arbuckle. Let me tell you a little bit about her before she joins our stage. Lieutenant Commander Twyla Arbuckle, U.S. Navy, is a native of Southern California. She received a Bachelor of Science degree in Professional Communications from Old Dominion University in 2012. In June of 2016, she completed her master's degree in organizational leadership from National University and received her professional human resources certification in 2020. She enlisted in the Navy in 2003 as an IT, and fast forward into 2019, she laterally transferred to the human resources community and helped lead the officer programs department at Navy Recruiting District San Diego to become the #1 ranked officer department in the Western region for 3 years in a row. And she completed her last naval tour as the Surface Forces Culture of Excellence Officer in Coronado, California. She is newly retired, serving as the Military and Teen Ambassador Chair of San Diego's Princess Project, a nonprofit that promotes self-confidence and individual beauty by providing free prom dresses and accessories to high school teens. She is a leader's leader and a powerful voice, and today, she is going to coach our community to shift from exhaustion to alignment without apology. Let's welcome right now Twyla Arbuckle to the Transformation Station Leadership Podcast. Twyla, welcome. We're so happy that you have joined us today.
Thank you for having me, Adrienne. I am so honored. When you reached out, I was like, holy cow, this is such an honor. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. My
Absolutely.
goodness.
Absolutely. So Twyla, we're going to jump right in because this conversation, it really is a vital conversation for leaders. And we're talking about high driven, dynamic leaders. And today, Twyla, we're talking about boundaries. We understand that boundaries, we think of them as instructions for how others can work with us, not walk over us. Boundaries are not walls. Instead, I like to think of them as guardrails. They don't push people away, but they help to keep our leadership on track. To our
Yeah.
listeners right now, I want you to think about this. When you have boundaries, you're able to say, this is when I'm available and this is when I need to rest. Oh, Twyla, let me tell you, as a leader for over 2 decades, I've struggled with that, with being
Mhm.
able to say, this is when I'm available and not be available all the time.
Yeah.
And this is when I need to rest and not feel guilty for taking a time out, right? Training time out.
Yes, ma'am.
When we have boundaries, we say things like, here's when I can commit, and here's what I can't commit to, right? We say
Absolutely.
things like, I want to help, but not at the cost of my health or my clarity. What do you
Yes.
think about those boundary settings right there?
Oh my goodness. You said it perfectly. You did. It can be, it is such a challenge trying to juggle it all. It really, really is. And I think one of the reasons why so many leaders struggle with trying to set those boundaries is because we just don't want to let anybody down.
Yes.
We I feel like as human beings we have this innate nature of wanting to more or less want to please people, especially the people that we care about. I mean, it's one thing to, have coworkers and have people around you where you're like, oh, okay, I'm here, I'll help whenever I can. But when it comes to the people that you really care about, your family, your partner, your kids, those folks you don't want to let down, especially your friends, things like that. So when you put those boundaries in place, you're trying to protect yourself, but at the same time you want to also be there for your families. It can just be a struggle. It really can be. But I'll be honest, I didn't really learn about how boundaries work until honestly like my 30s. It wasn't
Mm.
until about my mid 30s when I learned how boundaries work, and I wish I had learned earlier. But when I finally learned how they work, and when I finally had a chance to establish them, man, my life got a lot easier. It really did, because I was able to better communicate to my partner, to my family, to everybody around me what I needed. That way I was able to like you had mentioned, it was able to help me make those guardrails so that I didn't have as much burnout as I did prior to knowing about boundaries.
Hmm. You have touched on, I think, some really important highlights, right? One where we talk about that learning curve and
Mhm.
being able to come to that place where we are able to accept the fact that we really do need to have boundaries. And it's never too late. I love that. It's never too late to stop, assess, and reset. Stop,
Mhm.
assess, and reset. And so, to our audience, we're going to do a little assessment right now. I want to do what we call a leadership boundary check in. I'm going to give you 5 questions. And to our listeners, if you are watching this live, I want you to go ahead and type in your answers in the chat. If you are driving, cooking, cleaning, and you're listening to this, just kind of take your assessment on your own there. Okay. So here we go. And you're going to answer using this category: always, sometimes, or rarely. Number
Mhm.
one, do I feel guilty when I say no, even when I'm overwhelmed or unavailable? Go ahead in the chat or on your own, just put always, sometimes, rarely, never. Number two, do I regularly take on tasks that are not mine because I don't want to let others down? Always, sometimes, or never. Do I find myself working after hours, Lord have mercy, or checking messages after hours out of fear that I will fall behind or look uncommitted? Have mercy. Always, sometimes, or rarely, never. Number four, have I ever told my team or peers what I need to maintain my energy, focus, or availability? always, sometimes, never. And number 5, do I feel resentful, exhausted, or depleted by things I agree to? Always, sometimes, or rarely. It's important that you take time to be honest right now with your answers, because as we look to score it, if you find that the majority of your answers are in the always, then that means that your boundaries are working. Fantastic. And you are modeling what we call sustained leadership. If you find that your answers are in the sometime category, that means that right now this assessment is allowing you to realize that there is room for a reset. And if you find yourself right now in the rarely or never category, let me tell you something right now. Listen to me very clearly. Right now, it's time for a boundary shift. It's time for movement. True assessment causes there to be a reset. Okay. So Twyla, I want to start off by asking you this question. Here's the question.
Mhm.
Why is it that so many leaders often struggle to set boundaries, especially those of us who are in service based or high demand roles?
Mm. Honestly, I think you just touched on it. It's managing those expectations, especially for those of us in the Navy. There is this unwritten rule that if you aren't one of those sailors or one of those leaders that isn't working all the way past 1700 or past the end of the day, like, wait a minute, you're leaving before everybody else is. You get there's that perception that you're not doing enough. And I couldn't, I was a surface warfare officer. We're the ones that, for those of you that aren't in, we're the ones that drive the big ships.
Mhm.
We call it SWO guilt. And it's any time you feel like you're not going above and beyond, essentially above and beyond has really just become the standard.
Mercy.
And it's exhausting. It really, really is exhausting. And there's also that known saying, perception is reality. Even
Yes.
though folks don't often take the time to stop and ask questions. Hey, so and so is leaving early because they have a doctor's appointment, or so and so is leaving early because they're taking their child to a really important appointment or something like that. Folks don't want to take the time to pull back and just ask those questions. um,
Yes.
which is why it's so important to just stop, clear the noise, and you just have to set those boundaries. You have to be secure in yourself and say, hey, no one else is going to take my child to these appointments.
Mhm.
So I'm going to, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm going to take my child to this appointment. Oh, but by the way, whether or not anyone's paying attention, I'm also going to be here, at 06 or 07 or whatever, to take care of whatever else I missed,
Yes.
while I was gone. But it's just so important to block out all the other noise and be secure in yourself, knowing that you're going to be able to take care of what needs to be done at work, but you also have to be able to take care of, and it doesn't have to just be about your kids. It could be about your workout routine, about
Mhm.
healthy eating, not eating at McDonald's and, eating the garbage or whatever that you don't want to have to eat just because it's a quick fix to, feed yourself. Whatever those healthy boundaries that you're trying to set for yourself, that is what is so important, that you have to ensure that you are maintaining for yourself, because if it's important for you, then it's important for you, period.
1000%. 1000%. And to our leaders who are listening right now, I want to invite you as we're going through this podcast episode to definitely take notes, but also capture your reflections so that when this is over, you can share your reflections with us and or put it in the chat so we can continue to build our community. You touched on something that is really powerful. You talked about healthy boundaries. And I love this quote that says, healthy boundaries don't limit your leadership, they protect it. What a mind shift. I'm also, military as well. And you are so right. Culture many times demands that we sacrifice. Here's another quote that I found that I absolutely love, which says, the culture often rewards sacrifice over sustainability. And when your identity is tied to being the reliable one, saying no feels like you're letting someone down, even when you're running on empty. Woo! I want to say ouch right now, but I won't say ouch. I'm going to say, mm. This is real. And if you are listening and watching and you can identify with this, I want you to go ahead and put a one in the chat. Culture often rewards sacrifice over sustainability of our person, of our mind, of our families, of our well being. We run ourselves ragged. And the only time we stop sometimes is when we can no longer. Twyla, I can't tell you how many people, unfortunately, that I know of that worked for many years in these high pressure jobs, retired, and then had a heart attack. Or
Mm.
because they finally stopped, their body said, I don't know if you heard of the book that says the body keeps the score.
Mhm.
Because they finally stopped, their body said, oh, wait a minute. Now I finally have an opportunity to deal with what's been going on for so long. And these individuals are not or were not able to enjoy their retirement because now they're trying to take care of issues that they did not take care of all along.
Mm. Wow.
I have learned over the years, and I'm still learning, that true leadership is not about being endlessly available.
Yeah.
It's about being intentionally aligned, showing up with my presence, not with resentment. Even now, I often ask myself, what am I teaching my staff when I am always available?
Right.
What
That
am
part.
I teaching them when I'm always available and when I'm causing them to always be available? When I show up at 6:30 and I don't leave until 6:30,
Mm-hmm.
what am I teaching them?
Mm-hmm.
How am I coaching them or modeling for them what appropriate balance looks like?
Mm-hmm.
Always going to be those seasons where you have to put in extra time. You got to do the overtime. There's a big project that's coming up or something spontaneously happens, but that can't be the norm.
That part. Yes. It can't.
I want to ask you this next question. What are some signs that a leader's lack of boundaries is hurting their team or the culture?
Mm. That is such a good question. So I noticed working at my last command, I was the culture of excellence officer for SurfPac, the surface forces. For basically, my boss was the SWOL boss, the surface warrior officer, and he's in charge of all the different ships. Basically, if it's floating on the water, he was in charge of it, whether it was manned or unmanned. And my job was to essentially go on all of these ships. And in addition to being the culture of excellence officer, I did assessments of this SAPR program, the Sexual Assault Prevention Response Teams. And I had an opportunity to go on board, talk to the commanding officers and the triad, the CEOs, the executive officers, as well as the senior enlisted chiefs on board. And every time I went on board, I also had a chance to look at some of the destructive behaviors that essentially all the destructive behaviors that was taking place on board, whether it came to suicide awareness, sexual assault, drug and alcohol, and those were were telling signs of how the culture was on board. And when it comes to a lack of boundaries, when it comes to leadership, oftentimes in my role there, those would often be telling data points in a sense where when we noticed when it came to, certain ships having, high op tempos basically being underway a lot because, we have there's a lot going on in our world there, we have to go out there and take care of business. But when we did notice that there were a lot of destructive behaviors going on board, that was an opportunity for our leadership to talk to their leadership and just say, hey, you know what? We've noticed the data points are telling us that there may be a concern here. We have a lot of resources, and we just want to take a moment and have a discussion and make sure that the sailors are doing okay. We want to make sure not only the sailors are doing okay, but you all as leaders, how are you guys doing? We have a ton of resources. I know you being a chaplain, I know I could not speak enough about how amazing the credo, the chaplain's resiliency, and I hope I don't mess up this acronym, credo, chaplain resiliency, I forget the E.
Enrichment, development, operations.
Yes, all the amazing programs when it came to the marriage retreats, the single sailor programs, all these different trainings that they would have. We would always pitch to folks how amazing those would be. But just knowing that there were essentially red flags within the sailors, within teams, that was a clear sign of a lack of boundaries from leaders, because somewhere, somehow, from the top, or not necessarily from the very, very top, but within the chain of command, boundaries weren't put in place to ensure that standards aren't being met. Another thing, standards, like basic standards, uniforms, just, military bearing. When those things go down, that's when we start noticing major issues go up. And it can be really dangerous, and it can be really costly. And at the end of the day, it's all about taking care of our people. Like that is the most important thing across the board to any organization, in my opinion. And I know I'm a bit biased. I've been in the military my entire adult career, but I would hope that in any organization that the people are the most important asset. And so as a leader, you gotta make sure that you are maintaining those boundaries when it comes to setting a standard, so that your people are being taken care of at the end of the day, so that they don't snowball into major issues that can become dangerous.
Fantastic. And you're so right. Couple of things. So one, we have Dr. Devin who's watching with us on YouTube. So glad you're with us. And she says, great point. We need to set boundaries for ourselves and our team. They will appreciate it. Leaders, listen up. It's really important. The boundaries are for you and your well-being, but it's also for the health of the team that you are leading, right? And so, as you were talking, I was thinking about a few additional telltale signs that our boundaries really need to be more enforced or set in our workspaces. Number one, when we see that there's team burnout, that is becoming the norm, everybody's always tired. They really don't want to be in the space. Nobody ever logs off. People are texting and calling and emailing each other morning, noon, and night. That is a red flag. That is a red flag that our boundaries are not being enforced. Number two, when there's role confusion and overreach. I have seen in a lot of workspaces where nobody really knows who's doing what. there's something that needs to be done, but since nobody knows who's doing what and the roles are not clear, everybody's now trying to do it, and there's no real boundaries that are enforced.
Exactly.
Team members are stepping on each other's toes, getting upset with each other, tolerance levels go down. It's confusion.
Hmm.
And so if you notice that the workspace that you're leading, if the boundaries are not clear, if responsibilities are not clear, if people don't know who's responsible for what, this is the time to step back and to lead your team to getting clarity.
Hmm.
We also, this is a huge one right here. If you notice that resentment is quietly building,
Mm.
quietly. When we are operating in workspaces where our boundaries are not clear, people tend to step back instead of stepping up. They tend to avoid as opposed to engaging. And when you notice that there's a quiet resentment that's building, and you can hear that quiet resentment sometimes in how people speak to each other, their tone, and the words that they use, they're very sharp with each other, or they're always sarcastic. That's a problem. And many times, Twyla, it's highlighting that you may have team members that may feel like they're being neglected,
Mm.
or that are so burnt out that they feel like they don't have any authentic to give to the team.
Mhm.
Mm, yeah.
You're
And then
absolutely
the last one that I thought of is just that you notice that the creativity, the innovation,
right.
the self initiation, it is decreasing.
Oh,
When you
absolutely.
see that self initiation is decreasing, nobody wants to step up, or nobody wants to. You say, "Hey, does anybody have an idea?" Crickets in the room.
Hmm.
Anybody can help us figure out how we can get this done? Crickets. Nobody wants to talk. That is a sign right there that we are not operating with clear boundaries. Hmm. So
Absolutely right.
I'm going to ask you this question, right?
Mhm.
From your years of experience, can you share with us what is like one or two good to go phrases for setting boundaries with confidence without guilt? Like good to go phrases are
Mhm.
saying like what are things that we can say to be able to start to set boundaries with confidence and without guilt?
Ooh, yes. So, question for you. Have you heard of the book Let Them by Mel Robbins?
I have
Oh
not.
my goodness. I love, love, love Mel Robbins. She has her own podcast, but she wrote these awesome books called Let Them. And essentially it's about how you just have to let go of wanting to take control of of situations that you essentially just don't have control over, or
Mhm.
other people. And at the end of the day, she just says, let them and let me. You have no control over what other people are thinking or what they're going to do, but you do have control over yourself and how you're going to react to whatever it is that they do or what they say. And I just wish I had read her book years ago, because when I finally listened to it over audio, man, it just brought me so much clarity and peace. But my go to phrase by far is let them. And I honestly, I think I'm going to get it tattooed on my arm somewhere just to remind myself, nope, nope. If someone's
Yeah.
acting crazy, let them.
Yes.
They're going to do them. But what am I going to do about it? I'm just going to control myself, my peace, my energy, because that's all I have control over at the end of the day.
Yes.
And then in addition to that, another phrase that I love is other people's opinions are none of your business.
Mm. Okay.
It's just
Okay.
it's really, really what it comes down to. And that's, when it comes down to perceptions.
Mhm.
Especially when it comes to guilt, we often get frustrated because it's like, oh, if they only knew that, what I'm going through, I have to do this and I have to take care of all these things in my life. And they just don't know, if they could just take a moment and think about what I'm going through. And it's
Mhm.
like, well, yes, understandably so. Everybody's working through personal battles that no one knows. But at the same time, other people are going to have opinions about you. And again, you have no control over it. And at the end of the day, that's their business.
Mhm.
And it has nothing really to do with you, because that person has their own experience, their own background, their own lived experiences, and there's not a whole lot that you can do to change their opinion. So you just have to move on smartly and be, the best person you can be. And, hopefully one day, if their opinion changes, great. If not, it is what it is. But yeah, let
I love
them and other people's opinions, none of your concern.
I love that. So, we're talking to high driven leaders, right? The high driven leader that's listening right now, Twyla just gave us some really important advice. She said, other people's opinions of you, that is their business. And, I know some of you are probably saying, yeah, that's easier said than done, right? Because especially in some of our high powered organizations, we're steered and geared to believe that other people's opinions, because whether it's promotion, someone else's rank, your junior, your senior, other people's opinions, a lot of times it carries a lot of weight. But if I hear you correctly, Twyla, you're saying that the most important voice that we need to pay attention to and hold as priority is our own, not someone else's. Someone else's opinion of you may inform how you move about, but it does not in any way, shape, or form dictate or identify your identity.
Yeah,
And
correct.
leaders, that's really important. I had to learn over the years as I look towards promotion, right? You're doing what you need to do to get that promotion, dotting your I's and crossing your T's. I had to remind myself, especially when I got passed over the first time, when I got passed over for lieutenant commander,
Mhm.
I was devastated because in my
Mhm.
mind, I'm saying I have done everything that the military has asked me to do. People
Mhm.
looked at my record, they scrubbed it, they didn't really see any reason why. And I'm saying, well, like my whole identity at that moment was wrapped up into putting on that rank. And I had to remind myself, wait a minute, no, 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 you are Adrian Benton, whether you are
Mhm.
lieutenant commander, that does not, that's not your identity. That
Right.
just informs the influence that you have and your ability to lead. But that's not who you are. And to the leader that's listening today, I want to remind you,
Mhm.
your position is not your identity. That is your calling, your mission, your purpose for serving, for
Yes.
using your gifts, your talents, your knowledge, your ability right now. But that is not that job, that position, that title, CEO, lieutenant commander, whoever you are, that is not your identity. And Twyla, my go to phrase that I have been adopting over the years is, here's what I can do. And here's what I
Mhm.
cannot do. It took me years to get to the place where I could speak clearly for myself. It's not that I was incompetent and couldn't do it, but I had guilt. I had felt guilt in saying, setting up the boundary to say, here's what I can do and here's what I cannot do. I would think it in my head, but I
Mhm.
would not verbalize it because for some reason
Mhm.
I did not want people to feel like, well, she can't do it because she's incompetent. But what was happening was, there's a phrase called compassion fatigue. And many leaders develop compassion fatigue early on. That's where you go, 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 go. You have compassion for everyone else, but
Right.
you yourself get tired because you're not being compassionate to yourself. And I developed compassion fatigue early on as a leader because I did not set up the boundary of saying no. But I'm telling you, the power that I begin to feel, the confidence that I begin to feel when I learned how to say, here's what I can do. Oh, no,
Mhm.
asking. I appreciate the request. Here's what I can do, and here's what I cannot do. Here's what you will get if I do this, and here's what you will not receive if I do this. My gosh, it gave me the ability to remain fully present
Yeah.
and at the same time with no guilt, confident as I moved forward to keep my word.
Love
Hmm.
that. Love that. Man, never heard of that.
It's
You just
important for
taught
us.
me something. I love that.
No, no, sorry. Go ahead. What were you saying?
No, I'm so sorry. I said you just taught me something. I love that. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Wow.
It's important for us to remember that boundaries are not barriers. They
Mhm.
are bridges to more honest, sustainable leadership. Leaders, you want to know how to have longevity. You want to be sustainable. You want to leave a legacy. It's important that you have boundaries that are in place.
Yes.
I tell you.
I love
So,
that.
so Twyla, I want to ask you,
Mhm.
how do boundaries help leaders lead more sustainably, especially when burnout is a real risk? Now, I want you to think about that. As you're thinking about it, we have Dr. Shauna K. Denner, who is joining us on YouTube, and she says, great point. It's important to not wrap up our identity in our position. Otherwise, imposter syndrome has room to take.
Mhm.
Dr. Denham, thank you so much for that comment. Imposter syndrome, not being authentic in who you really are. When that takes root, my goodness, it does not bode well for how we are able to show up authentically. But the question right now, Twyla, to you is, how do boundaries help leaders lead more sustainably when burnout is a real risk?
So that's a really good question. So I think the most important part about boundaries is communication. And for me, what helped me navigate burnout, especially when I could recognize the signs, like what you talked about, as far as, just some of the signs of my team, essentially, the lack of efficiency when it came to my team's productivity, was communicating with them what the boundaries are, and essentially those boundaries bleeding into expectations of what our mission is, what it is we have gathered together to do. So, in order to lead more sustainably, I had to regularly work with my team and ensure that they knew what it was that we needed to do, and regularly communicate what our priorities were. Because as time goes on, obviously things change. There's different times, there's different missions, and routinely things are going to change. Just as people, things were changing. I mean, I remember at one of my last times being a department head, there was a time where things were changing within the department, and there was a time where they were asking me to, go to a bunch of different meetings that were going to take away from me leading my specific department. But this was a meeting that was going to be like all day. It was essentially like a 4 or 5 hour meeting that had nothing to do with my actual department, but I could tell they were trying to get me to do somebody else's job. At the time, I was I had just had my second baby, had a newborn at home. My husband had just come back from a deployment. I was really close to being burnt out. I had to essentially put into place and say, hey guys, this is about as much as I can do. Basically, your point, Adrian, I didn't say it as eloquently, but I basically was like, hey, this is what I can do at this point. I am going to take care of my department, but I can't go to all these extra meetings because that's not what I was billeted here to do. I was billeted to take care of my job, not this other person's department. So I'm not going to be going to those meetings unless they have to do with my department. So I put it out there, and it was a little risky, me being not as senior as you, but, I put it out there, and I just said, hey, we'll see what happens. And, my department still did really well. We produced, but, me basically putting in a place, I'm going to do my job. It didn't receive very well with other folks. And when I left the command, I noticed that my end of tour award, it was downgraded.
Hmm.
And I was really disappointed to see that my end of tour award, basically at the end of the assignment, they basically rank how well I did. It was downgraded. But at the end of the day, I was okay with that because I knew I had a choice. I could have either been that what they expected of me, which was to go above and beyond and go to every single meeting that they needed. That was not really my job, but it's what they wanted at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I knew what was important to me, which was my newborn, that they weren't really thinking about, and their
Right.
job. My family, making sure that they were being taken care of, and then also my priority was my department, making sure
Mhm.
that they were being taken care of, that I wasn't shortchanging them by taking care of somebody else's department.
Yes.
So that's why it's so important to make sure that you communicate to not just your team, but to the folks up, above you, making sure everybody understands, hey, this is my priority, not just what's going on for what I'm in charge of in regards to work, but also other things, other outliers that they're not tracking. Because not oftentimes is your organization, your boss is going to ask, hey, what's going on with your work life? They're not always going to ask that because it's not always their priority. So it's
Mhm.
important as a leader that when you're trying to be a sustainable, productive leader, you oftentimes have to do a check in with all the folks around you and make sure that you let them know what are all the priorities in your life that are affecting your boundaries, give or take. Make sure you have a professional, productive way of communicating to everybody who is important to you, and you make sure that they understand, hey, this is why I have these boundaries in place, this is how I'm going to be as productive as I can be, and this is why. And then
Fantastic.
you just have to take it or leave it and be ready for those consequences, good or bad.
1000%. They call it the burden of leadership, but it's really not a burden. It really helps us to be able to keep that focus. There's a quote that says, boundaries are not about keeping people out, they're about keeping your purpose protected. And so,
Yeah.
as we turn the corner here, I want to invite our leaders to understand that while this conversation has focused on boundaries in the workspace, it's really boundaries for our lives. What we have talked about, it pertains to your home life, it pertains to a church and the community, it pertains to you and how you live your life. Boundaries are important. And when we have boundaries, when we have appropriate boundaries, they're not about keeping people away from us, but they're actually about keeping our purpose protected. What is your purpose, and how can boundaries, having appropriate boundaries in place, help to keep your purpose protected so that you can lead and live and love and learn with authenticity? So,
Mhm.
Twyla, I want us to end with giving our leaders some best practices for setting boundaries. And I have one or two that I would like to just share right now. Number one, I want to invite those of you who are listening, our high charging leaders, start with internal clarity. Twyla, I had a boss years ago who would always say to us, "To thine own self be true." She would
Mm.
always say, "To thine own self be true." And then she would say, "Call your own tilt." And whenever she said, "Call your own tilt," what she was saying to us was, don't ever lie to me. Be honest with yourself so you can be honest with me. If you did something wrong, you made a mistake, you didn't meet the mission, like just tell me. Don't try to hide it. Tell me, because if you tell me the truth, then I can deal with the truth head on and we can move quicker to resolution. But if you lie to me, we're going to go around in a circle. The truth will eventually come out, and then we don't get to resolution sooner.
Ooh, love that.
To thine
That-
own self be true. So,
yes.
so leaders, if you notice in this conversation that you need to do a reset with setting boundaries, be honest with yourself so then you can be honest with the teams that you're leading, with the teams that you're on. And ask yourself this question: what drains me and what fuels me?
Mhm.
When you are able to identify what drains you and what fuels you, then you know what boundaries you need to set up. I
Mhm.
am an introvert who knows how to be extroverted. My job calls me to be extroverted, and I know how to step up and be that extrovert, be the sunshine in the room, but I crave being the mouse in the corner. And so I understand that for me, I need to go in, engage, and I need to back up. There are some days when I'm at work that I have to tell my staff, I'm going to go in my office and close my door for about 15 minutes. And I'm
Mhm.
going to put on some jazz music because I need to re energize myself. I'm going to put on my worship and praise. I'm going to go just sit quietly because I've had enough of conversation and talking. I need to back up. But if I didn't know that about myself, I would stay fully engaged and I would get annoyed. I'd get short tempered. I would be saying things I don't want to say. I'll get resentful that other people are in my space. When what I need is to be honest with myself that I need space and then take the space that I need.
Mhm.
Oh, leaders, I know you're listening right now. What
Mhm.
boundary do you need to enforce? When you go to work tomorrow, can you go to work having identified what drains you and what fuels you and being able to set appropriate boundaries with the teams that you're leading? How can you encourage those you are leading to set appropriate boundaries? Let me ask you this question, leaders. What if in your next team meeting, before you started talking about business, you just simply went around the room and just, hey, you know what? Let's have a conversation so we can get to know each other in terms of how to work together. I want everybody in the room right now, just go ahead, just share with us what drains you when you're at work and what fuels you. I promise you, you will begin to learn more about your team and how to ebb and flow than you could have ever learned if you asked in other ways. And then the next thing I want to highlight is what you talked about. Twyla, you talked about communication. Communication expectations.
Mhm.
There must be an expectation that we will communicate clearly
Mhm.
and concisely. Some of us talk too much. We have a lot of words. We say a whole lot, but we're not really saying anything.
Mhm.
And people get lost in what we're saying, so they don't pay attention, or they feel like they must take control of the conversation because
Mhm.
they're not saying anything. Mm.
Yep.
So it's really important when we look at how to have boundaries, how to protect our energy, that we speak, that we give appropriate messaging that is clear and concise, clear and understandable, clear and firm, clear communication. What do you
Mhm.
think about that?
Love that.
Yeah.
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 Literally. Yes, because I know you literally just asked what's the best practice, and you literally just said it. Clear communication, but not just, oh, yes, because what is it? I know everyone typically has like their weekly meetings, but you have to intentionally have whether it be weekly, monthly, or whatever, to identify what the priorities are at that point in time throughout the different cycles of the mission, or throughout the different cycles of your organization, because they're constantly changing, they're constantly evolving, just as your people are constantly changing and evolving. And it's so important for sailors, in order to, excuse me, sailors, I'm sorry, I'm in the Navy, obviously, or was. It's so important that all of our people want to feel valued, but it's so important that we as leaders take the time to listen. And like you said, stop talking. Take the time to listen to our people and make sure that we are checking in with them and that we understand what they're going through. Because if our people know that we're listening and that we're caring and that we're checking in with them, they're going to run leaps and bounds for us. The productivity is going to go up, efficiency is going to go up, communication is going to go up. And in the long run, it works out for everybody. So, and it's not necessarily supposed to be a transactional thing. You don't necessarily want it to be oh, if I do this for you, but no, no, no. It's simply supposed to just be a pure. It's a human factors thing. If you just take the time to communicate with someone what it is you would like from them, they can communicate to you what you'd like from them. At the end of the day, it it should all work out. And if something is going wrong and that's how, excuse me, I'm all twisted up with my words, but honestly, that's a great opportunity. Those routine check-ins, it's a great opportunity to find out if something is going on with that person, and that'll help alleviate that guilt that could be going on. And that also really just gives an opportunity for both parties, the leader and that subordinate, to talk about what's going on. So
Absolutely. I love that authentic conversation, doing check-ins, right? What's working? Where is the energy leaking? What needs to shift? I want to invite everybody to remember that leadership evolves, and so should your boundaries. So it's okay to assess what's working and what's not working and do a shift. And it's really important, no but. And it's really important, though, that we stay aware of our boundary needs and where our strengths lie. Twyla, thank you so much for this conversation today. It has really been enriching. I think I learned a lot as well, and helped for me to renew as I work with my leadership team, how I, as a leader, can one, do that internal check in for myself, hold myself accountable, but then two, I'm going to go to work tomorrow and do a check in with my team, right? What
yeah,
fuels them? What drains them, right? How can we find balance in what we need to do? Not staying away from the hard things that we have to do or the challenging things, but rising to the occasion and seeking to have balance within it. How can our listeners or our viewers, if they want to ask you a question from this episode, how can they stay in contact with you?
oh, well, let's see. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram. And I'm pretty sure I'm probably like the only Twyla Arbuckle in the world. So if you Google me, I'm around.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you so much for the time that you've given us today. This really has been a very valuable conversation. We look forward to having you back again in the future for our Transformation Station community. So thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, Twyla.
Thank you, Adrian. It's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
You. All right. Well, this was a wonderful conversation. I want to invite you with this final call to action to take 10 minutes today and go ahead and list 3 energy drainers that you've accepted as normal and rewrite a boundary around them. You are not a resource to be depleted. No leader. You are a leader that is to be protected. Why? Because clarity builds trust, and presence builds culture, and boundaries build sustainability. I want to thank you for joining me here on Transformation Station. And if this podcast episode spoke something real to you, please go ahead and leave us a review. Leave it on Spotify and Apple and YouTube and Facebook. Share this episode with a fellow leader who needs this reminder as well. And here's the reminder: you can protect your energy without apology. I also want to invite you to check us out on Mondays. We have a new series called Best in Class series, where we talk about leadership issues that really are rarely ever talked about. And this coming Monday, we have Dr. Dawn Douglas, who is going to join us for that conversation. You don't want to miss it. So until next week, Wednesday, where Transformation Station will come back again as a community. Remember, same time, same platform. Stay grounded, stay brave, and keep on leading from within.